Hi, my name is Patrick Quinton. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dweller, and I just first want to thank everybody for tuning in and checking out this presentation and for your interest in promoting the development of accessory dwelling units or ADUs. And so what I'd like to do today is just kind of walk you through what an accessory dwelling unit is, why they're so important to helping solve our housing crisis. Talk a little bit about the process for developing an ADU and kind of the current legal and zoning framework for that. Talk about financing, which is probably the single biggest issue we have right now in the ADU industry, and then summarize that so that you kind of walk away with a good understanding of how to talk to others about how to approach an ADU project, and then lastly, just want to provide a little overview of what we do, which is trying to promote ADU development and with a particular approach to this market. So the first thing to understand is an accessory dwelling unit, and there's lots of names throughout the country, and so backyard cottage and mother-in-law unit, all sorts of names, but ADU is the term that is used most commonly. ADU refers to it's a legal definition rather than a type of structure. So basically, an ADU is a permitted second or accessory unit on a residential property. It can come in all sorts of forms, and we're talking about detached structures, attached basement units, apartments, attics, garages, but the term ADU refers to a legal permitted unit in one of those forms. And once again, that's one of the beauties of the ADU is that it can be used in very different ways on different property types. And so we specialize in detached ADUs, and so even within just the area of detached ADUs, you see a great variety of different designs and styles, and that's one of the great things about this industry is you can really find the type of structure that meets both your needs and the type of design look you want as well. ADUs and tiny homes are different. Nothing against tiny homes. Tiny homes are a valuable form of housing, and increasingly they're becoming a more common form of housing. But tiny homes typically have a different regulatory framework. One of the most important parts of tiny homes is that usually they're not permanent, whereas ADUs are permanent. There's no problem with confusing them, but it is important to understand that we're talking about different housing types. And so, the ADU is this powerful tool within the housing world because it offers a range of benefits and meets a variety of needs. At the top of the list are two things. One, it provides additional income if it's used as a rental unit, and many homeowners certainly would benefit from that. But the second piece is it adds desperately needed housing. So if you're a household that has a need for an aging parent or a returning child or whatever the needs are, ADUs are often the perfect solution for that. But they do a whole other range of things around adding housing in existing neighborhoods where there may not be sufficient space to build new apartment buildings and other types of housing. So they bring rental housing into neighborhoods that wouldn't otherwise have it. And then it also does help households thinking about downsizing, which is an important dynamic within the housing world, and demographic trends suggest that people increasingly are trying to downsize. So the process of developing an ADU, and I don't have time to really walk through every step, but typically we're talking about a process that can take anywhere from 6 to 12, sometimes 15 months, and it's typically a linear process that goes from like any other residential construction project where you do some upfront planning and analysis, you obtain the financing, and then you work through the formal process of getting plans and permits and then managing construction. The thing to remember about the process of developing an ADU is that it doesn't end once the building is done. When you build an ADU, you take on the responsibility to manage it, and whether that's because somebody in your family lives there, because you're renting it out, it is an ongoing responsibility, and it needs to be um, addressed, prior to taking on the construction of the ADU, so you're ready for that responsibility. The other thing to keep in mind is there's a variety of options for building ADUs, and you can go anywhere from your kind of high design custom built ADU all the way to some kind of DIY project that involves building out an attic that is almost ready to be a permanent unit and needs a little bit additional work, or the same thing. Oftentimes you see in a basement. The different ways of building ADUs are more often reflect what the property owner wants out of the project. Do they want more of a custom project? Do they want something that has a little bit more design to it, or are they looking for something that's more efficient or more cost effective? Typically, projects, most expensive projects are the most customized projects, and the least expensive projects are the ones that are either the most kind of standardized, and some cases DIY projects can get there. The cost of an ADU is going up, and it's troubling. And so as you think about ADU projects in whatever capacity, I think all of us in the ADU industry are trying to figure out ways to bring more affordable ADUs to the market. Right now, we're looking at structures that can cost over $250,000 per unit. And certainly in some parts of California and Seattle, you're seeing them over $300,000. That's just not affordable for most homeowners. And so in order to get more ADUs built, we need to all be working together to bring the cost down, and have options for homeowners of different needs, but that are priced closer to $100,000 to $150,000 per unit. The other thing to think about with an ADU is because it's a permanent structure, it has permanent impacts on a property, and while things seem quite disruptive during the middle of a project, oftentimes when the end product can look like the building has always been there. But it is important to think about the location, the layout of the property, kind of access in and out of the property. You're pouring concrete, it's a permanent foundation, you're sharing utilities, all these sorts of things that do come with an ADU project. They speak to the need to do a lot of upfront site planning to ask all the questions that need to be answered about location and interaction between tenants and homeowner, and access to the property. If there's desire for parking, where the cars are going to park, all these things should be discussed up front and planned for. And then, of course, there are property tax impacts to adding an ADU, and they're not. It's all an impact that can be priced into the ADU, and if it's a rental unit, it certainly can recoup these expenses, but it should be researched and studied depending on your local jurisdiction. The great thing about the ADU industry is that for the longest time, these units were basically not legal in most jurisdictions, and we're seeing the restrictions on ADUs and zoning codes fall away in nearly all West Coast communities, and certainly in communities throughout the U.S. So ADUs are now legal statewide in California, Oregon, and Washington, and they're legal in many cities. So the fundamental question that used to be asked around any ADU project is it legal? It's that answer is now typically yes in most communities, and that means that we now have the opportunity to build hundreds of thousands of ADUs. That wasn't the case a few years ago. So there's almost never been a better time to be working in the ADU industry or thinking about adding ADUs. There still are, though, various local regulations depending on where you live, and it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of an explanation, but it's important to to ask around, and these aren't in any way things that can prevent an ADU from getting built, but they certainly need to be taken into consideration. Um, uh, Once again, many of the state laws on the West Coast have now eliminated things like parking requirements and owner occupancy requirements, but there still are variations in fees and design requirements and restrictions on how big an ADU can be and things like that. So it's still something that, like any construction project, requires research to understand zoning and local regulations, but these are by no means fundamental barriers to ADU development. And then the other important consideration is financing, and unfortunately, we don't have really consistent options for homeowners, particularly homeowners who don't have a lot of home equity. And so, we believe it's the primary barrier now for property owners seeking ADUs. But it is important to understand the various options that are available, and then kind of where the gaps are. ADU financing right now is primarily home equity financing, and that just means that if a homeowner has equity in their property, they can go to a bank or a mortgage lender and they can obtain a home equity loan or a second mortgage line of credit, however you want to call it, or refinance their first mortgage and cash out their equity. All of this just allows you to turn equity into cash that can be used to pay for an ADU. If for homeowners who have equity, these are all great options, and with interest rates at their current level, it's probably a great time to be thinking about how to finance an ADU. Unfortunately, for homeowners who don't have enough equity, the options become limited, and there aren't a lot of companion financing options. If you can only pull half of the price tag an ADU out of your equity, where does the other half come from? There's no clear answer for that, and lots of local governments are working on solutions for financing solutions for homeowners who aren't sitting on a lot of equity. And just to be clear on this, the majority of homeowners aren't sitting on a lot of equity, despite what many people think. So this is an area that needs a ton of work. We do see some other avenues pursued, things like homeowners, subdividing properties or creating a condominium on their property and selling off the ADU. There's different companies now that offer home equity investments. So there's innovations happening, and we do expect the ADU financing options to be very different in the next few years. But for now, it's a struggle for most homeowners. So just to summarize, just kind of quick overview of the landscape of developing an ADU. There are experts in the ADU industry, whether they be developers or contractors or architects. So, we're always suggesting that people talk to either a company like ours or others, so that homeowners don't have to become experts in this. But in thinking about whether an ADU is the right kind of a project, it always starts from a needs analysis. Is there really a need for either the housing or the income on the property, and does this kind of match kind of what type of space is available on the property? If properties with healthy backyards that really aren't being utilized, it's a much easier decision to think about putting an ADU there to generate extra income than it is if it's the space on the property is tighter, or the space is actively used and the homeowner really is sacrificing a lot. So that's important to kind of think about it from a kind of a needs analysis and what's what you're giving up on the property. But then there's just some quick site analysis that can be done by anybody. Is there space on the property or in the structure? Is the property in a residential zone? Most places, while they allow ADUs, they don't allow an ADU where there's an existing apartment already on there. So some kind of simple questions can be answered. And then, of course, is there access to financing? And we encounter many homeowners who come to us and are very interested in acquiring ADUs, and they have great properties, and everything's aligned, but they don't have access to financing, and so the project really ends. So that's an important question to get answered early on. Um, and then at the end, even though ADUs are legal, we really do see variations among different cities and towns and communities. The ones that are actively promoting ADUs, they are great places to work and develop ADUs. The ones that aren't, it is a long, slow process, and I don't suggest that anybody invest a ton of time developing an ADU in a community where there's a lot of opposition. The time is probably better spent advocating for changes to these things, and then hopefully in the future more housing can get built. And then, as I mentioned, there really are great contractors and builders, architects. The industry is full of a lot of smart people trying to just get ADUs built. So hopefully one or more of these professionals can be of assistance. So I just want to finish off with a little bit about us. So Dweller, our goal is to make ADUs affordable and accessible. And so we've done that in kind of two primary ways. One is to drive down the cost of ADUs by offering prefabricated or factory-built ADUs, standard floor plans, so that there's not a lot of customization that drives up the cost of the project, and not a lot of site work as well. But we also offer an innovative ownership structure that serves as financing for homeowners who don't have access to financing. So first, in terms of the units we build, we take advantage of factory construction to remove all of the kind of uncertainty and waste out of the process. So climate controlled conditions, standardized processes, trained labor doing these units over and over again. That's their specialty, and we can use a process like this to create attractive housing installed that looks like any other newly built rental apartment with all the same features, but we believe a much higher level of quality because of the way that it's built. So we're building affordable, attractive housing, but at reasonable, predictable prices. We also offer as I mentioned, this unique financing solution, which is essentially a ground lease. So we enter into a ground lease with a homeowner, and the homeowner is able to then have an ADU built on their property at no cost to the homeowner. We end up developing the ADU, so we pay for it, we own it, we manage it, and then we rent the unit out and share a percentage of the rent back with the homeowner. And then the homeowner eventually buys us out of the ground lease at some point during the life of our lease with them. So the homeowner gets the ADU. They don't have to solve what is now a challenging financing process. They get income from the ADU, and then eventually, when their financial situation allows it, they're able to own it. So we think solutions like this are important to solving the challenge of building more ADUs. And so we've had what we think is a significant impact in that we're getting affordable ADUs built in the ground. They're being rented out at affordable prices, and homeowners are getting income, as I mentioned. So the importance of financing can't be overstated. To get ADUs built, we have to address the financing solution. And just to kind of really dig in on this point, everybody in the ADU market needs to have the financing question solved, whether it be a builder who has great ADU product, but they don't have enough reliable buyers because they don't have financing. Homeowners, obviously, the homeowners who could use the income the most are the ones with the least amount of equity. And then lastly, renters. The more ADUs we get built, the more housing we have in neighborhoods that need long-term rentals, and ADUs are affordable housing. They are naturally affordable, and so when they get built and used as rentals, they typically end up serving a market that isn't very well served. So once again, thank you for your time and for your strong interest in promoting the development of ADUs. We think this is an important housing type that needs all the everybody pitching in to make it serve as many people as possible. We are always happy to help anybody who's in this market with questions on how the process works, or how we do business, or how you can advocate for better local zoning. So please feel free to contact us with any questions. And once again, thanks again.